Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Todoroki's Conspiracy. This will be Part 2, Chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3, Part 3, Changing Room Confrontations. Shoto Todoroki feels like a fool. He thought that being there was enough for Midorya, that offering his friendship and silent understanding would be enough. He thought that being by Midorya's side would make a difference, that he could push away the bad, and that the two could pretend that everything was fine. It's what Shoto does, after all. When he goes to school, by Midorya's side, it's almost easy to pretend that his father isn't truly a parent. It's almost easy to pretend that the sweetest, most selfless boy that Shoto has ever met isn't one that's been abandoned by his own father. And then Shoto walks into the changing room after their hero class ends for the day, and he notices how Midorya doesn't stick around near the rest of the group to change, instead heading to a more hidden bench to get out of his hero costume and back into his uniform. Shoto feels as if he should follow, as if he should check in on his friend, but instead he focuses on getting into his own uniform. He lets Midorya have a few minutes alone as he dresses, but then Shoto realizes that, one by one, all the other guys are leaving and Midorya is still in the locker room. Midorya, who is usually one of the first ones out of his costume. When Midorya is the only one left in the locker room, except for Shoto himself, Shoto sighs and goes to check on the boy. He doesn't expect to find Midorya wrapping his stomach, bandaging up what looks like a rather large cut that goes across his entire stomach in a long diagonal line, but he does. "Midorya," Shoto says, and Midorya jumps ever so slightly, then winces as he accidentally bumps the cut. "Todoroki, I didn't know that you were still in here," Midorya says with a surprised tone, and Shoto blinks at this statement. "I was waiting for you," Shoto says, because he thought that it was obvious after how he spent the last week or so following the boy around, doing his best to make sure that the greenette didn't feel alone. "Oh, sorry, I was just trying to wrap this up. It's a little deeper than I thought it'd be." He ends the sentence with a laugh, and Shoto frowns. "That looks pretty bad. Why didn't you ask for a pass to see Recovery Girl?" Shoto asks, and he's surprised when Midorya waves it off. "I can't go to Recovery Girl," Midorya explains with a crooked smile, even as he wraps the long bandages around his torso. "She told me that she won't heal me anymore, reckless injuries, and it's my fault that I got hit by Kirishima during training, and that I didn't regain my footing in time to avoid the debris on the ground. I was too reckless, so—" Midorya shrugs, letting out a little cheer as he finishes up. "So I fix it myself." "She refuses to heal you?" Shoto asked, and Midorya nods. "Yep, but it's fine. I've got this handled." As if proving his point, Shoto watches as Midorya pulls on his shirt with nothing more than the smallest of winces, tugging on the blazer before grinning once again. "Come on, let's get back to class before Aizawa-sensei gets upset." When Shoto doesn't move right away, Midorya grabs his hand and pulls the teen, forcing Shoto to walk alongside him. Shoto feels disbelief course through his veins as he sees how easily Midorya hides his pain, as he forces himself to comprehend the fact that Recovery Girl refuses to heal Midorya. It hits Shoto with striking clarity just how easily Midorya walks off his pain, and just how often Shoto had seen Midorya injured. Bruises, cuts, stab wounds, broken limbs. How many of those injuries did Recovery Girl refuse to help with? When Shoto is silent for too long, Midorya looks at him with obvious concern. "Are you okay, Todoroki?" Midorya asks, and Shoto can't help but snort. "Me? You're the one bleeding, Midorya." Midorya shrugs as if it's not a problem that he's bleeding and that the school's nurse has and would refuse to help him. "It's okay, Todoroki. It's just a cut." "A cut that's at least 6 inches long, and deep enough that you had to wrap it with multiple layers of bandaging." "I've dealt with worse," Midorya says idly, and maybe he has. No, he definitely has. Todoroki has seen far worse on Midorya and his own body, but that's not the point. "Besides, it wouldn't be worth upsetting Recovery Girl. I know how to deal with injuries like these, so it's not a big deal." "Why do you know how to deal with them so well?" Shoto asks, and he's almost scared to hear the answer. "I got hurt a lot in middle school," Midorya says easily, and the words make Shoto's blood run cold. "How long has he been hurting?" Shoto wonders as they near the classroom. "I know his father left him for years, but physically too?" And as they walk into the classroom, Shoto can't help but ask himself, why didn't he go to any of the teachers for help if he was hurt so badly? He gets his answer not long after their class had ended. Aizawa was finishing up a lecture, and he's stopping and assigning their homework for the night as the bell rings. When he's done, the class seems to come to life, his peers turning around and talking to one another about their plans for the afternoon, be it homework or something else. Shoto watches as Midorya stands up, grabs his bag, and Midorya winces, face contorting for a split second, eyes narrowing and mouth curling into a frown. Midorya smooths out his expression right away, and for a moment Shoto thinks that no one else saw the blatant sign of pain that flickered across the boy's face, and Shoto moves to stand beside Midorya as their peers disperse. But then, just as they move to exit the classroom, their teacher cuts them off, calling out, "Midorya." Midorya stills, then turns around to look at Aizawa. Shoto does the same, the room silent now that only 3 remain. Yes, Aizawa-sensei." Midorya stutters out, and Shoto watches how Aizawa's eyes narrow, flickering over the shorter boy's form. "Are you injured?" Aizawa asks, and Midorya flinches in on himself ever so slightly. Well, you see," Midorya squeaks when Aizawa sighs, bringing a hand up. Shoto steps forward, planting himself ever so slightly in front of Midorya before he even processes his own movements, straightening up as if shielding the boy, and dragging it down his face. "If you're hurt, go to recovery, girl," Aizawa says, tone sharp with something that makes Shoto's blood heat up like he's using his quirk. When Midorya doesn't move, Aizawa glares at him. "What are you waiting for, problem child? I doubt that you've forgotten where her office is." "Right, Aizawa-sensei. Sorry, sensei." Midorya apologizes, and then he races out of the room before Aizawa can say another word to him. Shoto stays in the room, his entire focus locked on his teacher's expression. Aizawa looks back at him, and in that exact same tone he asks, "What is it, Todoroki?" Annoyance, Shoto thinks, and he takes a small step back, putting more space between him and his homeroom teacher. He's annoyed that Midorya got hurt. No, he was annoyed that he had to deal with Midorya being hurt. "Is there something you had to say, Todoroki?" Aizawa asks when the silence stretches on, and Todoroki feels his own eyes narrow ever so slightly. Wordless, Todoroki turns around and walks out of the room, making his way to find his friend. Maybe it's not just a top hero thing, Shoto realizes, as much as the thought makes him feel sick. Maybe it's just an adult thing, to be so disgusting. Shoto wishes that he knew how to cry. He feels as if he needs to right now. He feels like a fool. He thought that being there for Midorya would be enough, but it seems that Midorya is more alone than even Shoto is, because at least Shoto has siblings to help him when endeavor goes too far. Midorya can't even go to the school nurse or his homeroom teacher. Shoto sighs, resolve filling him as he realizes what he has to do. He has to find people who will help support Midorya, people who can be there for the boy in case Shoto can't. And Shoto has an idea of just who to talk to. Chapter 4. Part 4. Forming a Squad. Shoto makes his move the very next day, when Midorya waves their group on ahead to lunch with the promise that, "I'll catch up soon. I just wanted to ask President Mike-sensei a few questions about his quirk." Knowing that a few questions will inevitably turn into Midorya missing at least half of lunch, Shoto nods and promptly leads Uraraka and Ida out of the room. "We need to talk," Shoto says as they round the corner, and Uraraka blinks once before nodding rapidly. "Of course, Todoroki, what about?" she asks, eager, and Shoto can't help but wonder if she'll be this eager when she hears the truth, or at least part of it. He's not one to give away anyone's secret, not when he has his own to carry, but still he can hint at the truth, let the others figure it out, right? Right. "I'll tell you when we get to our table," Shoto says. "We just need one more person." His eyes scan the halls as he looks for them, but he can't seem to find them. Oh, there they are. Shoto angles his head so that his direction changes, heading to the student in mind. "Is it Sue?" Uraraka asks. "I think she's sitting outside today." "Not Sue," Shoto corrects, and then he's finally beside the boy he needs. "Shinso." Shinso turns his head, looking at Shoto with narrowed eyes. "Todoroki," Shinso responds slowly. "What do you need?" "Come sit with us at lunch," Shoto says, and Shinso's expression turns into a weary one. Is Midorya putting you up to this?" Shinso asks, and Shoto shakes his head. "It's about Midorya," Shoto responds, and Shinso's eyes widen ever so slightly at that. "Fine." Shoto waits as everyone sits down, glancing around to make sure that nobody's too close. Apparently his cautiousness takes too much time because Shinso clears his throat and asks, "What did you have to say?" Sighing, Shoto looks at them, takes in the worry that's evident on their faces, even if some show it more than others. That worry is what he needed to see, and he's glad that he's picked the right people to listen to him. And so, confirmation in mind, Shoto opens his mouth and speaks. Ochako loves her friends. She loves talking to them between classes, meeting up occasionally on weekends, trading life stories and parts of themselves without concern. She loves how kind, sweet, how supportive all her friends seem to be. She just She loves them, all right? She wants to keep them safe because the world is tough and so are her friends, but she's training to be a hero, and heroes protect others. So that's why, when Todoroki tells her that he has to share something about Deku, something that he won't say in front of the green-haired ray of sunshine, Ochako doesn't hesitate to follow, and neither does Ida, because he loves his friends as much as she does, even if he doesn't show it as freely as her. And neither does Shinso because, despite his claims of not being their friends, she's seen him sharing conversations with Deku. Nobody can say no to Deku's smile, after all. He's a sweetheart who just wants to make friends and be a hero. Ochako adores him for that. So to hear that something may be wrong, Ochako feels sick at the thought alone. And then Todoroki says what he'd called them over to say, and Ochako feels more nauseous than she did during the entrance exam. I think that there's something wrong with Midorya. Todoroki! Ida shouts immediately. You can't just say something like that about our friend. He means there's something going on with Midorya, not something about Midorya himself, Shinso says, voice filled with exasperation. Right, Todoroki? Right. Sorry for the poor choice of words, Ida. Todoroki says, and Ida forgives him immediately, also apologizing. There's something going on here, and I believe that Midorya is being hurt. Most likely, Ida says. Midorya usually gets hurt in training. Hurt by the teachers, Ida. Todoroki hisses, his normally stoic expression turning colder, sharper. And it's all because of All Might. The disgust in Todoroki's voice is obvious, and the fact that Ochako can hear the emotion in the boy. Ochako feels her stomach drop because Todoroki doesn't do emotional tones. What happened? Ochako asks, and Todoroki's eyes shoot to hers. Midorya is hurt constantly, isn't he? Todoroki asks, and she nods wordlessly. At first it was from his own attacks, shattering his bones. Wait, what? Shinso cuts in, and Todoroki nods. His quirk broke his bones every time he used it. He's just recently come up with a way to not shatter them. Todoroki explains, and Ochako sees how Shinso winces. But that's insane, Shinso says. How did it take this long for a solution to come up? Don't you guys have training classes? We do, but Midorya didn't learn this trick until internships, Todoroki says. In fact, that only makes it worse. What do you mean? Ochako asks. Because if it took 3 days for Midorya to find a way to turn his power from a self-destructive, bone-breaking weapon to one that he can use without ruining his body, then the teacher should have helped him to figure it out already. Todoroki shouts. He shouts at Ochako, at Ida, at Shinso, and Ochako hasn't heard him shout since his match against Deku during the sports festival. It only makes the words sink in deeper. Midorya should have been helped before internships even started. We have multiple pro-hero teachers, all of whom have different fighting styles and experiences that should have been used to encourage Midorya to learn his new application sooner, but instead, they let Midorya ruin his body, tearing apart his arms and hands to the point that his right hand is permanently disfigured. Todoroki scowls, clenching his own right hand for a moment. They didn't stop Midorya from damaging himself. In fact, they made it worse. How did they make it worse? Ida asks, and Ochako can see how he's gone tenser than ever before. To be fair, she's probably the exact same way. Is this where All Might comes in? Ochako asks, and when Todoroki nods, she feels disgusting. How? Shinso asks, and Todoroki forces himself to look up at all of them. All Might is pushing Midorya to go beyond the pain, and has been constantly telling him to push himself to his limits. He has made Midorya shatter himself and tear himself apart in an attempt to improve. I overheard them once before. During the sports festival, he told Midorya that he wanted him to show the world that he is here, or something like that. What's wrong with that? Ochako asks, voice weak, and Todoroki scowls. I didn't hear the rest of their talk, but whatever he said led to Midorya pushing himself to the point of breaking every finger in his right hand, mangling both of his arms, and needing surgery, all to show the world he has power. You think that All Might encourage that? Ida asks him, and Todoroki nods once again. He did, and I have no doubts that he's making Midorya suffer through worse. What? Ochako asks, and the word is ripping out of her throat, because it can't be true, right? This has to be some misunderstanding. All Might can't just... Isn't it odd? Whenever All Might runs a class, Midorya is always coming out with more hits than if Aizawa-sensei was in charge. Isn't it odd that, despite clearly having a connection with Midorya and a similar power, All Might encourage Midorya's self-destruction rather than helping him to find a solution? Isn't it odd that, whenever All Might is involved with Midorya's injuries, the teachers turn a blind eye? The last question makes Ochako's heart stop. What are you talking about? Ochako pipes up, and then she tears up at Todoroki's response. Yesterday after training, I found Midorya patching himself up. He'd been cut during our training, and it was deep enough that he used multiple layers of bandaging. He admitted to me that Recovery Girl refuses to heal him. This refusal, I believe, came after the sports festival because I haven't seen Midorya go to her office since. But Aizawa-sensei has told him to go, Ida cuts in. Didn't he tell Midorya to just go last week? He did, Todoroki admits. But I found Midorya in the changing room when class had ended. He was not exhausted, but he was already back in his uniform. I have no doubts that he had patched himself up because he carries around an entire med kit in his bag, and Aizawa-sensei is just as bad anyways. How? Shinso asks. His voice is sharp. How can he be as bad? Aizawa-sensei cares about his students. And Ochako has to agree. The USJ is a firm reminder in her head, with their homeroom teacher nearly losing his life to save them. While Aizawa-sensei isn't causing further injuries, he gets upset with Midorya whenever he finds out that he has an injury. Yesterday he scolded Midorya for being hurt. Todoroki huffs, looking down. He had the nerve to be annoyed. That's awful, Ochako says softly. Why would Sensei act like that? Because of All Might. Todoroki stresses the name. Because it's the #1 hero, the symbol of peace himself, and nobody's going to assume that he's harming his student. It's easier to blame the victim, to ignore his injuries and refuse to heal them, so they don't have to focus on what the man is doing. Ochako stares at Todoroki and sees how anger and grief runs through his eyes, and behind that she can see the firm belief that stands tall, the unwavering lack of doubt that he may be wrong. And Ochako believes him, as awful as it sounds, because the world is a tough one, and even the best people can be hurt. So even though Ochako just wants to break down and cry, she clears her throat and asks in a wobbling voice, What can we do to help? And Todoroki sighs out in a tangible, obvious set of relief at finding others who will back his cause, who will help Deku, and Todoroki tells them to protect him, to make him feel safe, and they all agree to stand by Deku's side. And when Deku joins them halfway through lunch, it's all Ochako can do not to tackle him into a hug right then and there, to tear the words out of him and promise to support him. Because Deku isn't one to open up for himself. But Ochako will be there for him, and this time she will save him. It's about time that Deku had some good in his life. All right, everyone. This concludes Chapter 4 of Todoroki's Conspiracy. Chapter 5 will be next. Hope you all are enjoying this one still, and as always, thank you so much for listening.